For all the baffling sagas that football has produced over the years, those tales of misjudged transfers, boardroom blunders, and tactical experiments gone painfully awry, there is something about the curious case of Clive Allen and Arsenal that continues to captivate. Not because it was the most dramatic or scandalous event to unfold in the game, but because even 4 decades later, nobody has quite figured out what on earth happened. Football loves its mysteries, and this one has remained firmly locked away in the archives, dusted off every now and then with a shake of the head and a sigh of disbelief. Even Allen himself, the man at the centre of it all, admits he's still in the dark. "I would have liked the chance to prove myself at Arsenal," he's said more than once. "I don't regret signing for them, but perhaps I've had it in for the club ever since."
It was just a crazy period. First £1 million transfer for a teenager. The game's gone mad. The media coverage was what's happening to football. It's gone crazy. And 63 days later, I was in a way surplus to requirements, and I was traded for a left back.
To fully appreciate the sheer oddity of it all, you have to rewind to the summer of 1980. Arsenal, still licking their wounds after a grueling 78-match season that saw them fall agonisingly short in both the FA Cup final against West Ham and the Cup Winners' Cup final against Valencia.
That's it! West Ham have won the Cup! It's gone to the second division for the 3rd time in 8 seasons. David Cross
Were in need of something, anything, to lift their spirits. Terry Neal, the manager tasked with steering the ship, had decided that the answer to their woes lay in bolstering their attacking options. Enter Clive Allen, a 19-year-old goal machine from Queen's Park Rangers, who had racked up an impressive 34 goals in 55 appearances. Arsenal splashed out £1.25 million to secure him, making him the first teenage footballer in English history to command a 7-figure fee. Neal was triumphant, beaming for the cameras and declaring, "Our supporters deserve the best, and that is what I believe we have given them by buying Clive." And for a fleeting moment, it all seemed to make perfect sense. Then, just 62 days later, Allen was gone. Shipped off to Crystal Palace in a swap deal for left-back Kenny Sansom without so much as a single competitive appearance to his name. It was, by all accounts, a transfer that made absolutely no sense.
Break for him. Sanson's gone right forward as well, still with Beardsley. Now there's Sanson, the chip by him! Oh, a marvellous save!
Arsenal had willingly spent a fortune to secure one of the country's most promising young strikers, only to send him packing before he could even lace up his boots for a proper match. Even in the notoriously unpredictable world of football transfers, this one took some beating. Fans were left scratching their heads, journalists dug for answers, and Allen himself was left utterly bewildered. He had featured in a couple of pre-season friendlies, heard the whispers linking him with Palace, but believed, hoped, that it was all just speculation. It wasn't. Neal eventually pulled him aside, confirming what he'd already begun to suspect. He wouldn't be featuring in Arsenal's opening game of the season, and instead he should go and have a chat with Terry Venables, Palace's charismatic manager. Venables could sell sand to the Arabs, Allen later remarked, and it didn't take long for the move to materialise. A couple of handshakes, a bit of fine-tuned persuasion, and that was it. Allen was no longer an Arsenal player. In his autobiography, Up Front, co-written with journalist James Olley, Allen reflects on the episode with a mix of bemusement and frustration. He had been excited about the move to Highbury, eager to prove himself, and yet within weeks he was on the outside looking in. Of course, in the absence of clear answers, speculation has filled the void. One particularly persistent theory is that QPR's chairman at the time, the formidable Jim Gregory, had no intention of selling Allen directly to Palace and his former employee Venables. Arsenal, in this version of events, were merely an unwitting stopover, a convenient detour on the way to Selhurst Park. Another theory, equally plausible, suggests that Palace were in a dire financial situation and simply couldn't afford to buy Sansom without offering up a valuable asset in return. Arsenal, it was argued, saw an opportunity to solve a pressing defensive issue and took it, leaving Allen as collateral damage. And then there's the simplest explanation of all, the one Neal himself eventually gave years later in his book, Revelations of a Football Manager. "The forward combination didn't look right," he wrote. "We had to make a judgment in the best interests of the club." Which, naturally, leaves more questions than answers. It's fair to say that Allen's career didn't suffer too badly from the whole debacle. After a brief stint at Palace, he returned to QPR, picked up where he left off, and was soon lured back to North London, this time to Tottenham Hotspur, where he would cement his status as one of the deadliest strikers of his generation. In the 1986-87 season, he racked up a staggering 49 goals, a record that even the relentless Harry Kane has yet to surpass. Arsenal fans, watching from across the city, must have wondered what might have been had Neil shown a little more patience. But what of Kenny Sansom, the man Arsenal ultimately decided they needed more than Allen? By all accounts, he served the club well, establishing himself as one of the finest left-backs of his generation and a mainstay for England. Solid, reliable and unfailingly consistent, Sansom was the sort of player you could count on. But left-backs, for all their virtues, do not win you titles. Prolific strikers, on the other hand, most certainly do. One can't help but wonder whether Arsenal might have secured a little more silverware in the 1980s had they kept faith with Allen and his uncanny knack for finding the net. Football, of course, is full of sliding doors moments. The decisions made in boardrooms and dugouts can ripple through the years, shaping destinies in ways that no one can predict. Arsenal's choice to prioritise defensive stability over attacking firepower might have made sense at the time, but in hindsight, it's hard to see it as anything other than a misstep. Allen went on to have a storied career, bouncing between clubs, trying his hand at American football, and eventually finding his way into coaching.
Back. You're in the centre forward position. What do you do next, and why?
Run away.
No, okay, I know why.
Run away.
Why?
To create the space that he's going to deliver the ball in.
But the sense of unfinished business with Arsenal has never quite gone away. And perhaps that's why his brief 62-day spell at the club continues to fascinate. It's not just about what happened, but what didn't. He never got the chance to prove himself, never got to wear the red and white in front of a packed Highbury crowd.
Well before the end, though, Villa supporters had heard the Ipswich score and nothing else mattered. The inevitable pitch invasion could have been very nasty.
Never got to show those fans exactly what they had paid all that money for. Instead, he became a footnote, a trivia question, a name that pops up every so often when people talk about football's strangest transfers. Neil's decision may have been in the best interests of the club, but it's hard to shake the feeling that Arsenal missed a trick. They gambled on a defensive upgrade and, in the process, let a potential goal-scoring legend slip through their fingers. Allen, for his part, has taken it all in stride, making peace with the fact that some things in football simply defy explanation. It was a strange time, he says now with a wry smile, but that's football for you. And so, the story lingers, tucked away in the annals of football history. An enduring reminder that sometimes even the biggest clubs don't always get it right. Whether it was poor planning, financial opportunism, or just plain bad luck. The Clive Allen transfer saga remains one of those tales that leaves you shaking your head and wondering, all these years later, what on earth they were thinking.